Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're starting chapter 2, properties of angles and triangles. Some of the things we're going to be looking at throughout the chapter. The lesson goals will be able to develop spatial sense by we're going to prove properties of angles formed by intersecting lines. We're going to prove properties of angles in triangles and other polygons, and we're going to use proven properties to solve geometric problems. Alright, so the first couple of sections we're going to do side by side, and we're going to be exploring and looking at angles that are formed by parallel lines. So here's some of the terminology that we're going to go through in the first, throughout the chapter. But first we're going to look at some of the definitions. So when you hear me using some of this vocabulary and terminology, you'll know exactly what these mean. So first is a transversal. That's a line that intersects two or more other lines at distinct points. We're going to be using a transversal through parallel lines. I think it's quite clear that you can see that these aren't parallel. Next we have what are called interior angles, or any angles formed by a transversal and two parallel lines that lie inside. So that's interior angles. Alright, so A, B, C, and D are all interior angles. We'll talk about some of the properties of those in a little bit. Exterior angles are any angles formed by transversal and two parallel lines that lie outside. So A, B, C, and D. Corresponding angles are one interior angle and one exterior angle that are non-adjacent and on the same side of the transversal. And they are equal, those corresponding angles. So this angle here, this is an interior angle. This is a corresponding exterior angle. These are both equal. Alternate interior angles, and this is also known as the F pattern. You'll see it forms an F. You'll hear that sometimes. Alternate interior angles are interior angles on opposite sides of the transversal that are adjacent to different parallel lines. Alternate interior angles are also equal. This is sometimes referred to as a Z pattern. It comes down and makes a Z. Those angles are also equal. And then we have what are called alternate exterior angles, all right? And those are exterior angles on the opposite side of the transversal that are adjacent to different parallel lines. And alternate, exterior angles, I apologize, are equal. Next we have co-interior angles. They're interior angles on the same side of the transversal. And they will have a sum of 180. So they're on the same side of the transversal, co-interior, so 75 and 105, they add up to be 180. Okay? Transverse angles, angles on opposite sides, right, of the transversal and are on opposite sides of the same parallel lines are called transverse angles, and they're also equal. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180. You've probably heard that before. And complementary angles are angles that add up to 90. And a converse statement is a statement that is formed by switching the premise and the conclusion. And we'll see those when we get there. I'll talk more about that. Okay? So let's look at solving for some of the unknown angles. Again, we assume that these lines are parallel, otherwise we couldn't solve that. Sometimes you'll see little arrows. All right, but if it's not mentioned, we assume they are parallel unless we're trying to prove that they're parallel. Okay? So X and 121, they are equal. And why are they equal? Well, if we can look back and refer back to what we learned earlier, and we'll go up here, and we'll see right here. They're called corresponding angles. Okay? Corresponding angles. So that is equal to 121 degrees. $121. Angle y, x and y well, you could use it two ways. You could call x and y using one of the ones we just learned, and that is transverse angles. Or we notice that these are alternate interior angles and they're also equal. So that is right here. And I won't do this all the time, but alternate interior angles are also equal. Okay, so you can use either one. Of course, right now we're just finding what they are and listing them. Okay. All right, so now we have angle x. So we know it's 71, and we have angle x. These are called co-interior angles. And co-interior angles have a sum of 180. All right, so if we know that that's 71, we subtract that from 180, we know that this is going to be 109 degrees. We have both equal 180 added up. And angle y, these are called transverse angles, right? And that would be 71 degrees because they're equal, transverse angles. Next, in the question number C, we got 4 angles to find. First, we're looking for A. We can use one of the properties we haven't used yet for angle A with reference to 180, and that is we could use supplementary angles. Angles on the opposite side of both the transversal and the parallel line are supplementary. All right, we could use that. Yeah, that would be the best one to use, just the supplementary angles. Okay, so supplementary angles. So that means that A would equal 100 degrees. And then we have B. And A and B are called, that would also be, we could use A to B if you wish, supplementary angles. We have a line through here, the transversal. So the two lines opposite on there, they would have to be equal 180 as well. Or you could use B with reference to 80 degrees to give an angle if you want, and they could be called transverse angles. Either one is fine, but at the end of the day, we want to know that they are equal to 80 degrees, right? Okay. C and B are equal, and C and B are called corresponding angles. So if we look up one of the first ones we learned, corresponding angles, one interior and one exterior that are non-adjacent on the same side of the transversal are corresponding angles. They're equal. So that's the property I used in order to determine that. So that would be 80 degrees. Okay. And angle D, again, we can use the same property. Corresponding angles D would also equal 80. All right. It corresponds to D, or you could use the fact that D and C are transverse angles. There's lots of different properties you can use. There's not only one. Okay. So B, C, and D are all 80 degrees, and A was 100. Okay. Let's look at example 1D. And we're looking for angle E. So angle E and 75, they have a property together. Again, we assume these here are two parallel lines, and then the B are the two transversals this time. So E and 75, we look up. All right, we have what are called, oh, I passed it, sorry, my apologies, co-interior angles. Okay, co-interior angles. So E and 75 are co-interior angles, and they add up to 180. So I take 75 and subtract it from 180, and I get 105, 105 degrees. Okay. Next, what we can do is we can find F. Now, the reason we can determine F is there's no angle in here, but this angle right here across from the 75, they're called transverse angles. So we know this would be 75, right? So to determine angle F, three angles in a triangle add up to 180. So if this is 75, 75 plus 47 would be 122. And three angles in a triangle add up to 180. So I take 180 and subtract 122, and I get 58 degrees for F. So F is going to be 58 degrees. Okay? Angle G are transverse angles. So F and G are equal. So G is also 58 degrees. And the last one we need to determine is angle H. And angle H, if you flip back up, are what we call corresponding angles. Okay? One interior, one exterior angle. They're also equal. So that would give us 58 degrees also. Okay? So that's D. Question E. We got a few more angles to find here, but again, this is what I was talking about before. These arrows show that these are parallel, and then these arrows here show that these three transversals, if you wish, they're also parallel. So lots of parallel happening here. Okay. So J, they would be supplementary angles. They would add up to 180. So angle J would equal 108. Or sorry, 106. My apologies, 106. All right. And E and 74, they are corresponding angles, so they're equal. So that means that E would be 74 degrees. So just using these properties all along. E and K, they would be called co-interior angles. They would add up to 180. So that tells you that K is going to be also 106. And now we have F. F and K are corresponding angles. So F would be 106. And again, you could have used 180 subtract 74 to get F, because 74 and F are called co-interior angles. They add up to 180. F and G, they're transverse angles, so they're equal. So that G would be 106. Okay. Then we're determining H. And to determine H, we can go all the way back to 74. We know these lines are parallel. This would be considered a transversal. So these would be called corresponding angles. So we know that H is 74 degrees. The interest part here is the transversals are also parallel. So that this creates a lot of properties. And then I and H, same idea. They're also corresponding angles, so they would also be equal to 74 degrees. So lots of properties there that work. But again, the reason the only two angles we have here is 106 and 74 is because of the fact that we have transversals are also parallel, which is not always the case, right? So that's it for example 1. So in the next video, what we'll do is we'll start looking at some of the properties. So we'll not just figure it out, but we'll identify the property for each one. Okay? We'll identify what the angles are and the properties. So I hope everybody enjoyed watching the first videos and looking at some of the terminology. And we'll continue on again in the next video with angle properties and exploring parallel lines. So I hope everybody enjoyed the videos. Thanks for watching.